Hello, my name is Joseph Venezia, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Merchandising Optimization in the Digital Age, hosted by the Aberdeen Group and sponsored by GroupSoft. Our first presenter for today's event is Sahir Anand, Vice President and Principal Analyst of the Retail and Banking Practice with the Aberdeen Group. Sahir oversees and enables the overall research and analysis in the vertical industry segments, including retail and hospitality, and retail banking-related process management and technology value chain areas. Mr. Anand's work is related to the use and adoption of technologies and processes that help aid optimization and efficiencies in the multi-chain business environment. We will then hear from Amitabh Nima, founder and principal consultant of GroupSoft, providers of SAP solutions and experts in SAP consulting, implementation, and support, and the architect for GRMAP, enterprise software solution for the merchandise and assortment planning. Amitabh has more than 2 decades of experience in retail solutions, especially in the retail and fashion segment, and is an acknowledged thought leader on retail and merchandise assortment planning. So if you'd like to submit a question for the question and answer session at the end of the webinar, please click the Ask a Question tab in the lower left corner of your screen, type your question, and then click the Ask Question button below. So it is now my pleasure to turn the webcast over to Sahir Anand. Sahir, the floor is yours.
Joe, thank you so much. And let me just take a second here to welcome everyone who's joined the webinar today. And a very good afternoon to those on the East Coast, and I think it's still morning on the West Coast. And anywhere you're joining us internationally, good evening. So my name is Sahir Anand. I'm the Vice President, Principal Analyst for Aberdeen's Retail and Consumer Markets Research. And today's topic is a critical one, one that presents an opportunity for us to unravel some interesting pain points, implementation ideas, as well as some thought leadership around the ever so critical process of merchandising. And when you combine merchandising with personalization and the importance of customer conversion, merchandising is seen in a very different light. And that really is the topic for today's virtual webcast. And myself and Amitabh from GroupSoft would hopefully walk you through some interesting findings and revelations. We'd encourage interaction. Please send us your questions via the question box, and we will certainly take those up at the end. So let me kick off today's webinar by saying that the state of retail merchandising is at a crossroads. And the reasons are the following. First off, the pressure is coming directly from the consumer in terms of personalization. It's not just the personalization that we typically associate with online commerce. Today, retailing is all about the extent of customer personalization across all channels. And the in-store experience is not devoid of this pressure. In fact, in-store experience is right within this pressure of increasing customer personalization when it comes to really identifying customer preferences for understanding what impact is merchandising making on the shelf. When it comes to the use of customer promotions within the store, it's not just through your in-store promotions, loyalty programs, rewards, or your weekly circulars. It's that whole notion around lifetime customer value and customer loyalty and how that truly interrelates with merchandising. The second trend shaping the state of retail merchandising and has an impact on suppliers and the CPG community as well is really the lack of shelf-level visibility in really understanding the impact of merchandise process management on in-store operations, on channel operations, and on customer operations. So how does unit-level merchandising really make an impact in terms of a personalized store environment and that store environment that ultimately drives customer traffic and uplift, as well as the conversion aspect, which is so critical for store comp sales. The third critical trend is really around the use of data. So it's not just your big data strategy in really understanding how do you combine the varied data sources, right, from point of sale to the call center to your web data to your all other in-store shipping data sources. But it's really the ability to streamline your product catalog as well as all the centralized merchandising data, the OTB data, the data relative to your top-down, bottoms-up merchandise planning, the allocation data and the assortment data, as well as the multivariate attributes that retailers use in order to really derive the size, SKU, color that's required in the stores, whether it's apparel, specialty, or any other retail segment. So centralization is a key point, and so does master data management come into play. And then the last trend, which is really shaping the state of merchandising today, is how do retailers who have traditionally believed in the 80-20 rule, that the 20% of your top sellers are essentially going to drive 80% of your margin, one size fits all, put up a store and they will come. Those kind of notions have typically guarded the merchandising framework for retailers in the last 20 years or more. But now the approach is more towards localization. So do you go in with the goals of the chief financial officer in setting up a broad plan and a budget and then figuring out what do you sell, or do you really start from the shelf and the SKU level data and plan bottoms up, looking at the concerns of the chief merchandising officer, the director of merchandising, and the VP of merchandising? So there is a equilibrium there where you can take a balanced approach and you can combine both top-down and bottom-up plans in order to reach an equilibrium and an optimized way of merchandising. So that, folks, is the top trends shaping the state of retail merchandising. Now, how do all of these top trends really drive specific planograms and specific assortment sets in the retail stores? So when we conducted a survey of about 150 retailers recently, tier 1, tier 2 retailers, essentially what we were able to determine is that when it comes to the in-store planogramming strategy, the biggest impact is due to the high number of SKUs. So retailers who are dealing with 20,000 or more SKUs, retailers who are dealing with 50,000 more SKUs, or relatively speaking, retailers who are dealing with any number of thousands of SKUs. So that puts a lot of pressure on the extent of planogramming and the overall planogramming strategy. What communications you send to your stores, and essentially that pressure is not that high for the other channels. It's specifically felt in the stores, because in the stores you need to create a physical environment, and the presentation has to be top-notch in terms of not only the facings but also the bulk stocks, the shippers, the aisle placements, complementary and non-complementary items. The second highest pressure, or rather the second highest characteristic that is shaping planogramming strategies in stores for more than half the retailers, is the regionalization of products. And that is really about localization. Localization is playing a huge role in shaping retail strategy today. So you take the example of Family Dollar, Macy's, and others. Everyone is trying to come up with a profit-optimized merchandising strategy which is more customer-centric. And that's where it brings in an element of regionalization based on demographics, specific customer demographics, affinity, preferences, what customers like and what customers do not like, and go down to a segmentation level, which Chico's FAS did recently and found their earning per share going up because they adopted a customer-centric merchandising strategy, which was very much based on extensive customer analytics. The third factor, which in fact is playing a bigger role outside of stores in other channels such as online and catalog, is the large section variations. So there are different product classifications that have a very different look and feel to address different levels of customer personalization and search criteria. That's playing a huge role for more than half the retailers that operate on the online and catalog side. That is a big factor in the stores too. You can see a lot of differences in department SKU size optimization and SKU color optimization, and those are the key factors. So channel characteristics at the end of the day are really deciding what the planograms look like, and regionalization as well as localization is playing a big role in retail today. So let's look at how Aberdeen defines what are the best-in-class companies doing in terms of really optimizing end-to-end merchandising. So right from merchandise financial planning to merchandise planning, allocation, assortment management, all the way to analytics, and then also deciding upon their strategy for promotion, pricing, and markdown optimization. And then, of course, space optimization. So here are the Aberdeen results. Aberdeen results show that there are 3 KPIs that have distinguished best-in-class companies from average and laggard, starting with customer satisfaction rate of 94.3% on average for the top 20% of retailers. Secondly, a key merchandising related attribute, which is out-of-stock rate. And best-in-class companies have a mere out-of-stock rate of 5.5%. So 94.5%, what is expected on the shelf is there to be sold. Then finally, the increased profit margin performance. And what best-in-class retailers have shown is that because of their ingrained focus on localization, on really deriving customer data and really honing in on that customer data, they're able to really increase their profit margin performance by 17.2%. And it's not just the focus on customer data, it's the alignment of different departments. Merchandising with supply chain, order management, merchandising with marketing, merchandising with IT. That's why best-in-class companies are right on top. And you can see the results of the industry average, who are the middle 50% of retailers, and laggard retailers right at the bottom, where their results show a dismal picture. So having looked at what best-in-class companies are doing, let's consider the top pain points of best-in-class retailers. What are these retailers really facing out there? And what can the other retailers learn from them? Or perhaps follow them or figure out, are our pain points similar to the best-in-class pain points? So the number one pain point for best-in-class retailers, that's the quadrant on the left, starting from the top, is the need to maximize inventory turns. What the best-in-class retailers are facing today is a high inventory situation. And this situation has sort of really come into play in the last 10 months or so. If you look at the incoming freight traffic, that has increased month over month. There was just 1 month in the last 10 to 12 months where the incoming freight traffic has actually declined for tier 1 retailers. So when you see freight traffic on the rise, when you see the warehouse inventory as well as in-store inventory on the rise, the need of the hour is to sell. And that's the age-old adage in retail. Sell, sell, sell. But how do you maximize inventory turns? How do you really combine the varied attributes of planning, merchandising in a way that you can actually have the right assortment at the right place at the right time? And that's what best-in-class companies are trying to figure out. The second highest pressure is maximizing gross margin, or GMROI, gross margin return on inventory investment. And when you compare that with all other retailers, you don't see much of a difference. In fact, all of retail has 2 major pain points around gross margin and inventory turns. And they just intermittently change over. But the third factor which is critical is that all other retailers have a problem around customer centricity and lack of customer data. Now let's look at how that translates into strategy. So this chart essentially really lays out the top strategies for best-in-class retailers, that is optimizing their overall merchandising. The number one area is the improvement in demand forecast accuracy. The top retailers out there are focusing on improving demand forecast accuracy because, candidly, demand forecast accuracy in retail is less than 50% today. And what the top retailers have figured out is that if they do not improve demand forecast accuracy, they are unable to really come up with accurate merchandise plans and accurate assortments for stores. So they can avoid over inventory as well as under inventory in the warehouses and in the stores. So that's a key point, focusing on the demand side of the business. Then it's extremely critical that the best-in-class retailers have figured out that they need to drive the assortments towards value and utility. In this economy, customers are looking for greater value per purchase. In every transaction, they're looking for value and utility. And the top retailers have figured that out. And what they're doing is they're identifying certain categories within their assortment set which can drive value and utility so that the customers walk into the stores and then they cross-sell and upsell to drive the top sellers. So that's a sea change from, say, 5 years ago where it was one size fits all. The third area for more than a third of retailers is the creation of precision assortments. And precision assortments really looks at customer segmentation data, and you go deeper and deeper into varied segments and identify your most profitable customers, but you also identify those customers that need to be bounced back, that need to be brought back to spend at the store. You also identify those that have been retained in the last 6 to 12 months. How do you create more focused ethnicity, demographic-based merchandise sets that are really geared towards every consumer, not the general consumer, not being a retailer who's everyone, who's for everyone. You really identify specific segments, and that's where a lot of the traction is there in the market right now in terms of creating accurate, precise, and localized merchandise plans. And you can see the comparison in the all others category where you can see that while the all other retailers, the average and laggard retailers are also focused on demand forecast accuracy, they're also creating more precision and localized assortments. And finally, they're more focused on improving the quality of merchandise presentation in the stores, an area which the tier 1 retailers to a large extent have addressed already. So how does the strategy translate into the strategies by channel? So what our data is showing is that both stores and all other channels, such as online, are focused on improving overall demand forecast accuracy. So taking the demand repository, demand sensing, and also in certain cases for more mature retailers, even shaping demand. Secondly, the point that I raised earlier is that in the store, there is greater pressure towards creating precision assortments, much more than other channels. Because in the store, the access to data, the predictive nature of data is lacking. Whereas in the channels, you can pretty much make out who your customer is, where they are shopping, how are they searching, and how personalized would they like their shopping experience to be. So the channel data issue is much easier to solve and less complex compared to the store data issue. And that's where I think retailers are focused in really driving precision and localization in the store environment. So those are the top two areas where merchandising strategies differ by channel. Then let's move on and find out how does the business process really differ in the stores versus the channels. What our data shows is that the top two areas are definitely the area of localization where there is a common merchandise requirement across all channels, but then there is a variable component. So you have 60% common merchandise across all the stores, but then you have a higher component of the variable aspect where you are localizing. And in our experience, there are retailers who have really cut down on the common component and are localizing more extensively. Yes, it requires bigger resource and infrastructure, but it actually drives results in terms of profit margin and uplift. So that's the number one area where the stores focused in terms of improving their business process as it relates to merchandise management. The second highest area we are seeing is that more than half the stores are trying to conduct multivariate, attribute-based assortment planning. So taking into account multiple attributes to not only shape demand, but actually respond to that demand in terms of setting your inventory targets, setting your open-to-buy requirements, and actually balancing your open-to-buy requirements with your open-to-buy budget. Being able to really look at the multiple variations of the different attributes that you can actually encounter when you are opening up your planning spreadsheet or your planning tools, and looking at that multiple variables in order to plan the right way. That's not just size, skew, color, or looking at what-if scenarios. It's actually going deeper into your promotion cycles and deeper into your customer segmentation data in order to really understand affinity, preference, as well as lifestyle issues. So that's quite critical. The other point that I'll raise over here is the importance of what-if scenarios. More and more retailers in the stores are trying to focus on solutions that have what-if scenario tools. So not only can you determine what a typical scenario would do in terms of allocation and assortment planning, but how is that allocation actually going to impact the warehouse in the store in terms of a particular promotion cycle. And that's a very important area of focus for the store teams when it comes to the merchandise planning process. The next slide focuses on the extent of use of data when it comes to merchandise planning. Whether it's financial planning, whether it's your typical MDM processes, your product information management processes, the fact is that data plays a huge role in driving merchandise effectiveness and merchandising accuracy. What our data shows is that best-in-class companies are not only trying to figure out, two-thirds of them are not only trying to figure out the mechanism or the methodology for really capturing accurate customer data at the point of sale and sharing that data with their suppliers and their community of trading partners, as well as their merchandising teams, through new methods such as tablets and the use of mobility, as well as barcode capturing in real time, but also being able to permeate that data within their organization and provide more real-time reports to their planners, to their buyers, to their category managers. So these individuals can take on-the-spot decisions, and mobility is playing a huge role in terms of streamlining this process. The second area, which is even more interesting, is the use of price elasticity data. Traditional price management does not take into account, at least not fully, the importance of price elasticity and the impact of price elasticity on demand as well as the supply side processes. When it comes to effective merchandise management, end-to-end, the role of price elasticity cannot be underscored. In fact, there are retailers that we are talking to today who are reaching out and asking for Aberdeen data on how they can change their entire merchandise planning process by including pricing optimization and promotion optimization. So bringing in elasticity data that can really put them on the upward curve in terms of the competitive pricing. So their competitors' pricing elasticity is something that the retailers want to be able to address, and they want to be able to address that by integrating pricing data and the price elasticity data into the merchandising process. You can see the differences between best-in-class and all other retailers when it comes to the ability to integrate your MDM strategy as well as the merchandise management systems with order management data. So when the order is being placed, the cycle time for the orders, the ability to understand lead times, and really the overall end-to-end order management process from design to deliver. How do you bring in that data into your current merchandise systems? By the way, for all of retail, 50% of these systems are legacy in nature. So how do you create another data stream which can really empower your buyers and your merchandisers and your category planners? And so order management data integration is a best-in-class trait. And then lastly, the example that I made of Macy's and companies like Chico's FAS, there are several other retailers that are doing it in the best-in-class category. The integration of product affinity data, the affinity of the customer, on when they buy X, why would they buy Y item? Or if they buy both X and Y, what does that lead to when it comes to a third complementary product, whether it's in groceries, specialty, or even apparel and luxury, where the integration of product affinity data becomes even more critical due to a shorter life cycle of the product. So having looked at the importance of data and analytics, let's look at what does the technology environment look like when it comes to end-to-end merchandising. Our data shows that when it comes to merchandise planning and merchandising systems, the two more critical aspects of that is merchandise financial planning, assortment allocation, and space management. More and more companies are now focusing on promotion, pricing, and markdown optimization. My belief is that markdown optimization is a tool that can be avoided if you can really figure out your merchandise planning and the overall performance of the merchandise system, right from financial planning all the way to space management. Financial planning and space management are critical components, but let's not overlook the importance of assortment and allocation, because at the end of the day, assortments is what decides how a customer reacts to a product at the shelf. So that's the most highly used end-to-end system in retailing today. And by the way, this is an area where there's a lot of legacy in retail and requires change management. Then comes the area of point applications, where you've got a combination of the focus on inventory forecasting. We discussed the area of demand forecast accuracy. That's a key area for best-in-class retailers. So we are seeing a lot of traction for inventory forecasting applications in the industry for 6 out of 10 retailers. For another 6 out of 10 retailers, there's a focus on on-time replenishment. Then you've got point applications like merchandise financial planning applications. I just spoke to an apparel retailer, a high-end apparel retailer recently, and they're actually deploying a complete change management module around implementing a new merchandise financial planning application. And they have a overall focus on improving their merchandise planning end-to-end. And lastly, merchandise allocation for nearly 6 out of 10 retailers. So that's the overall technology environment that's shaping retailing today, from end-to-end to point applications in terms of the area of merchandising. Now, what are the planned enablers? And the number one area, according to Aberdeen, where best-in-class companies are going to adopt new applications, those that change the dynamics for their positioning in the marketplace, is the adoption of mobile merchandising. The use of mobile handhelds, the use of different mobile platforms, the iPhone, Android, Windows 7, and all other applications and platforms-centric applications that can drive more real-time decision-making and more empowerment for the buyers, merchandisers, and planners. Guess is a great example of a company that's investing in this technology for introducing more mobile merchandising applications from planning all the way to execution, as well as analytics. Another great example is the use of mobile merchandising by organizations like Cabela's. They're trying to empower their headquarter teams with more mobility and on-the-spot decision-making tools, followed by the example of Chico's FAS in the use of extensive customer data analytics and socioeconomic data in their overall merchandise planning process to derive greater accuracy and precision. And then the use of promotion optimization. Good example is the use of promotion optimization by organizations like Dick's Sporting Goods. They've recently adopted a life cycle pricing promotion optimization solution to enable better uplift and less cannibalization across their categories. Here is a best-in-class roadmap for store operations as well as merchandise management systems. Look at the second tier right from top, the importance of integrated customer-centric merchandising that has 4 pillars. If you're a best-in-class organization, you're already doing this, but if you're not a best-in-class organization, focus on demand management, inventory integration with the merchandising process, inventory visibility, as well as inventory collaboration. And that will define the complete execution aspect associated with customer-centric merchandising. If you want to drive customer conversion, if you want to drive traffic to your stores and beat out your competition, embrace integrated customer-centric merchandising with 4 pillars, i.e. demand management, inventory integration, visibility, and collaboration. And then let's look at the current metrics real quick before I hand it over to Amitabh from GroupSoft. For all of retail, we are showing results as follows. Inventory forecast accuracy is less than 50%. Full price sales as a percent of overall sales is just over 51%. Markdown sales as a percent of overall sales is quite high at 27.9% right now. Overall customer satisfaction, that's not just relative to merchandising, but all aspects of retail, is at 75%. For best in class, that's a pretty high number, but also for other retailers. The sell-through percentage is at 76.8%. But when we ask retailers what are the top 2 areas where you would really focus in order to find the best results for your merchandise strategy, the top 2 areas are undoubtedly all about inventory turns and out of stocks. Those are the top 2 metrics, as well as GMROI. So those are the top 3, let's put it this way. Inventory turns, out of stocks, and GMROI is how merchandise optimization is being determined in retail. To really be able to use a barometer, these are the 3 metrics that you should be focused on and covering, besides all the other metrics like OTB, target attainment, inventory target attainment, open to buy requirement, as well as all the other revenue and budget-related metrics for merchandising. At this point, I'm going to hand it to Amitabh, who can walk you through some of his findings and what he's seeing in the landscape. Amitabh, take it over.
Hi, Sahir. Thanks a lot. Before I take it over, I would like to have a question, Sahir, from you. In the last slide, you mentioned markdown is going 27.8%. Okay, is that what a standard trends, or it is changing? Is going to change where the economy is going to grow?
I think that's a great question. So the extent of markdown as a percent of sales, according to Aberdeen data, has increased nearly 20% in the last 10 to 12 months across a broad range of retail categories. The only category where we are not seeing that kind of a trend is EDLP, and that's for obvious reasons. But when it comes to high-low pricing formats, as well as the premium pricing formats, we are seeing that the pricing aspect is more variable today, and companies are looking at markdowns as the way to really not only bring in customers, but also in order to drive the full price sales. And that's unfortunately the sad reality that we are dealing with today. Now, whether that can change or not, that's questionable, but what that really brings into focus is that there is too much inventory, and companies are trying to find unique ways in order to get rid of the inventory. And for this holiday season, what might be interesting is to see based on the current assortment size and sets, how much markdown will we see in Q1 and especially in January and February this year, because that will really define the retail performance for Q1 of next year.
Thanks, Sahir. Pretty interesting insight. Very good afternoon and very good morning to everyone across the place, and very good evening from my friends internationally. This is Amita from GroupSoft. I'm going to, take you through some of the experiences which I have recently in various markets. As a company, we're implementing GRMAP, which is a merchandise assortment planning tool, and I'll take a couple of customers as a case of point and example, and just take you through that what Sahir is all about talking about, the pain points and how we have covered as part of our offerings. And it's pretty interesting the issues which basically customers are facing today, the retailers are facing today, and the demand apart from the inventory is also moving based on the change in the whole technology scenario. So the social media definitions, the mobility definitions, and on top of the economic downturns is really making a solution providers to think differently what we used to think. Based on my SAP experience, I've really, mulled over a period of time, and I realized that this is a great area to operate because there's a huge conversion of customers as well as a solution technology has to require. So I'll take some of the tech, inputs from the Sahir's report. What his key findings are. One Sahir is talking clearly is about personalization, which from a solution perspective it talks about purely a local assortment, faster stock replenishment, and building a customer loyalty. And that's the most important thing. A solution provider has to think that how does he going to personalize his solution, which is basically going to attract more customers, and we're going to take care of more, consumers' requirement. Second thing which Sahir has pointed out, that unit level merchandising management, which is basically, again moves up to the personalization, and there again, you have to focus as solution providers. How do we go with the stock and SKU level planning, which is a very, very tedious exercise. Any retailer who's operating today with a large number of data size, store SKU planning becomes a very, very tedious exercise. That's what one of the other point, which is a solution point of view, we look at it. The third point, which we're talking about, is a centralized merchandising data management. Now, this ultimately leads into a very, very a discrete system talking to each other as a single system, and a customer or retailers or planners need a single dynamic business analytics, which basically gives them a 360-degree view of data, that how it has been incepted, how it has been conceived as in style, and how it has been sold to the different stores, and what is the performance of that, and how the customer is satisfied about it. So we are talking about the CRM data, we are talking about the MDM data, we're talking about supply chain data, and ultimately we're saying that dynamic business analytics are required on top of that to ensure that the right decisions at right time can be taken to address this requirement. The last point, which basically which I look at, is the top-down and bottom-up planning, which is purely a financial planning, talking to stock norms and stock turns, and then basically giving a clear dimension of top-down and bottom-up. But it also has to go and integrate with core supply chain system. So whatever you plan in the financial numbers and whatever you plot at assortment at bottom-up level, you need to really integrate that same exercise with the supply chain system. So retailers are traditionally using the core ERP systems, then they have the different CRM systems, then the different point of sale systems, then the different loyalty systems. So how do you integrate along with that whole supply chain system with top-down and bottom-up planning? That's one of the major point which I see is going to be, is a solution point of view, what one has to look at, and that exactly, the dimension of solutioning, we are becoming in the picture. Now, another point which Sahir actually has pointed out very clearly, and it's pretty clear, that out of stock, which is 5.5, and the difference between the average and best in class is almost 20%. So if the average retailer wants to reach into best in class, out of stock is one of the very, very key strong findings which he has to work on. And that basically, turns down to be in a pressure point with how the inventory turns and the gross margins are working along. So out of stock really drives the inventory turns, and ultimately that's what basically everybody looks at, that with the economic downturns also, the inventory turns becomes very important, that ensure that it does not impact your cash flows and increase your future growth. Based on the pressure points, what my take on the finding is that we're talking about demand forecasting, very, very accurate demand forecasting. That means churning huge amount of data, looking at localization of data, and then going to store SKU level and predicting a right forecast from a stock point of view and ensuring that we have a very precise merchandise available for for the consumer to come into the store and buy it. And that basically ultimately the priority is that assortment, or probably a local assortment. That's what basically we're talking about here in the priority point of view. Now, considering the pressures and the strategy action priorities, there's a couple other capabilities which basically we talked about, that it has to integrate it. That means it has to have 360-degree view. Otherwise, the integration, if it's not there, it's not going to be full-fledged software solution. So you need to have a CRM, customer-centric experiences, which brings the loyalties. We have to have a price elasticity, which we're talking about promotions, markdowns, and we're talking about looking at more margins. So again, the price has to be more, ensure that that the margins are also building up, so we're not losing out on based on markdowns and promotions. So pricing becomes more dynamic. The order management system again comes back to the whole supply chain integration, that whatever you planned, how it has been executed to store level and how it has been sold to the store in the consumers. That is the most important element comes into picture. Then the product affinity, which basically typically again the liking and disliking, and this brings a different topic altogether, because with the social media coming into picture, product affinity is almost become more complex that what was the thing earlier, and that's what basically the key finding which I really look at it, Sahir's report. Now, based on this, we realized that assortment and the assortment is the key thing, and that's how basically we have started working back 4 years back on the planning solutions, and we have offered a product called GR Map, which is a complete integrated merchandise assortment planning tool, and it basically serves multiple purpose for the different retailers. And what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to talk about how this solution has been taken. So I have a reference point, which basically I'm going to talk about 3 different retailers, which basically I worked with in the past 1.5 years, and then I've looked at their different experiences and see how the basic pain points we've covered. So we have 3 retailers. One I've covered from the US, which is basically a private label customer, has 120 stores and typically 14,000 SKUs in a year they operate with. Very limited number of users, so that was not a bigger issue, but still the processes are very complex as their wholesalers also. The other retailer, which basically is which I'm taking into consideration as a part of my Middle East customer, who's basically operate out of 8 different countries within the Middle East, and they have a centralized merchandising system across multiple countries. That's like really a complex situation where basically the whole process becomes very, very challenged here, because the buying behavior, the planning behavior is almost different in every country, but the planning is happening centrally, and how do we look at a consolidation view? So this is a second point. The third retailer, which is one of the largest retailer out of India, which is a 3.5 billion retailer, and they are having almost 1,000 plus stores, and they have a huge number of customer bases, a 5.5 million customer walk, a number of SKUs which are there, and almost 220 million customers walks in a year. So this is like really a complex situation. So I'll be talking about these 3 different customers, how we have done and what we have done for them, and basically compare it and how it has gone ahead. Looking at these customers' background, in terms of both were all the 3 customers were having SAP platform. So there was an SAP AFS customer who was manufacturing and distribution. Games was also in part of the story, and then the other 2 customers were basically primarily SAP retail customers. They were having analytics tubes, which is a SAP BIW, and we also have Experience MicroStrategy as part of one of the other analytics tools. So there are a different mix of customers which basically the technology landscape was. This is what we covered over here, and what we have implemented. We have implemented the top-down planning, which you're talking about, financial planning. Then we have integrated the open to buy, and then went into the assortment planning. And few of the cases we also went ahead and implemented range planning, which is more a fashion-driven range planning in terms of product life cycle point of view. And we have integrated them with the SAP BW and BO projects as well as the MicroStrategy. So there's the integration involved. So the project was really, end to end in terms of we are touching the ERP system, we are touching the integration layer, we are touching the analytics system, and we are building basically a big block for them to really operate and cater their business needs. So I'll just brief you about what the GR map is all about. So GR map is typically we have 6 different components, and these 6 different components are basically broken into as a component you can implement a part of the modules. So the financial plan point of view, the strategy planning, merchandise planning, store and location planning is the first component, where basically you take care of your sales forecast, your stock forecast, most the value perspective, and you look at your margin portfolio planning. And that's what basically the first planning which is available. Then for the people who are doing the fashion business, we have implemented a range plan, which you're talking about, primarily a line planning in terms of the new season. So if the fashion customer has a multiple season to operate, so how the range planning has been implemented. Assortment planning is primarily to do with in-season, where the assortment has local assortment comes into picture, where we integrated promotions and markdowns heavily in this, and that was really complex. Now, along with this, the fashion customers also needed open to buy, which was again both at the financial level as well as the rolling OTB, where basically the impact is happening in season, that how the forecast is changing your open to buy, and that has to integrate with the financial system as well as the purchase ordering system. So the extent of integration went into the cash flow and fund flow from open to buy, not only limited to the purchase ordering system. That's what we have done. And then we had a very interesting for general merchandise allocation and replenishment system, which was important for us to operate. And these all the systems are integrated. That means right from strategy plan, you can look at it, what basically the impact it's giving to allocation, and if you're doing the allocation, what the impact is happening to merchandise level. That's what the crisscross we have built up. Now this is a very, very traditional or very, very these are the components are very much available today in the market. But the biggest part which we have realized that looking with the current trends, where we have a social media as a technology point is the most important factor. Then we have realized that the user experience is changing altogether with the tablets and iPads coming into picture. Then there's an economic downturn which is hitting us in terms of, so you need to have very agility has to be there in the system. So we need to have a very strong inbuilt algorithms. That's what we needed. And to an extent the mobility is going to be a necessity, and that's what I'm experiencing, that people want to have that in place. So apart from these components, we build up some of the innovative thought process within the system, and that's what basically we have looked at the customer analytics, the CRM system, to be part of the store planning system and the strategy planning. So when you're doing the strategy planning, the customer-centric outlook has to be available to you, and that's what first thing we have done. We have looked at the product liking, disliking point of view, the social media interfaces, where the people are going with specific surveys and poll engines, which the data centricity comes into picture. That's what we integrate. We have embedded the marketing, campaigning plans, the competition plan in terms of what the competition is planning, and we look at how our plan look with the market share of the customer or the different competition looks like. We have built up a very strong proprietary algorithm engine, where we have a breakbacks, balancing, aggregation, distributions, and dynamic scales, which basically has speed up the whole processing system. And last but least, but the most important, we have developed a very strong mobility engine as a part of extension of our planning solution, which people can look at plan versus actual performance, so they can decide fast. We have built a planner and replanner application, where basically people can take a category level and SKU level decisions on the mobile. We have developed a basically inventory management, stock controlling, where we can see what the stock position is, what the demand is going, and people can look at the smartphone and request in your smartphones, which basically talks to the ERP system as planning system to cover that. Most importantly, the mobile allocator, where the allocation is a huge data needed, and every day allocator sitting and looking at the complete DC data and the store data, and based on priority they're doing it. We have given a mobile allocator where people can allocate the stock on the fly. So it's like on time, real time basis. There is a need of mobility, and allocation has come into picture. And the final part where basically we are building various business rules, which is throwing across the alert messages to the consumers, or basically to the customers as well as to the retail users, where they can see what are the alerts are coming and promotions are coming, and if demand of stocks is coming. So across the whole planning community and the retailer, this can be used. So that's like one of the key elements for us to go in when we reach to the customers and we demonstrate all these things. This was one of the major differentiator what we played along with the planning. So we have combined the whole thought process of processes along with the futuristic outlook, where the mobility, where the social media, where the competitions and all those things has been embedded in the system. That is one of the innovative thought processes we brought in the system. Now, coming back to if you look at the key challenges which I perceive is Excel was a major competition for all of for us, most of the community. We agree with that, but I feel that Excel now graduating into iPad, where the user interface becomes the most amazing experience, and that's what the biggest challenge which all are facing. Second thing which I look at is the challenge point of view on the top down. You do not have a standard retail planning process. So every retailer wants to plan a different manner. You do not know which hierarchy level he's planning. You do not know which location level or regional hierarchy level he's planning. So that is a different outlook of retail planning process. Adoption of forecasting algorithm are different category to category. How the food behaves, how the general merchandise behave, how the fashion behaves, that's altogether different algorithms you need to deploy over there. Reconciliation processes between the plans, how the merchandise strategy and store team does is altogether a different ball game. And then all along this process has to integrate with the ERP. That's challenges was always always there. So that's what basically the key challenges and on a top-down perspective we have seen across these retailers. So traditionally, if you look at the user interface experience, we have changed the whole thought process going into Excel sheet based planning then rather than going to video and image based or Google map based planning screens, where you can zoom into the state, look at the cities and see what the performance of cities are, zoom into city, look at the store performance of cities, and you can compare at the same time with what different states and different regions are doing it. And exactly, that's I've given a screenshot here. That's the way basically we looked at it. So that interface we have built in. We built in the marketing collaterals, videos in the system that we can see that this is performance, is a market campaign is coming. So how are you going to look at it when you're going to plan proper? So that's what basically the interface has changed in this context. So this is one of the thought processes where we say that user interface is the most important thing, because most of the users are playing with the data and how do we innovate this data. Then as a planning standard perspective, we looked at it that none of the retailer had standard planning processes. So somebody wants to do a planning at department level, at merchandise, somebody wants to do it at class level and subclass level. Then people are looking at, some of the brand people want to do a month level planning, but most of the people like to look at a week level planning. Same way, if you look at that store, location planning, you either will do a comp, non-comp planning, or you want to do store cluster 2 planning. So this is like become a very, very messy and very, very dynamic. So what we've done is we've provided an agile aggregation and distribution algorithm engine within every planning screen. And that planning screen means that whenever you're planning, at let's say class level, automatically system will give you that what is the impact on department, sub-department, and a merchandise category level. If you're planning at month level, you can see the impact on week level, how it distributes, and you can see the impact on quarter level. That's how your period planning can look at it. Same way, if you look in comp, non-comp level, you can look at it how the region looks like and state look like. So that's how basically we build up this particular engine, which dynamically does the planning at other levels simultaneously when you're involved in one of the stages. That was one of the major input in this context. Then to facilitate more functionality, we build up a very key performance based store clustering option, where basically people can go with a dynamic clustering option. We are given the what if scenarios where people can look at various graphs and analysis while doing the planning, so it basically makes more important into the decision making. That's what we provided. To do with the local assortment, we have went ahead and built a local store profiling system, which basically used for store planning as well as range planning and aggregate to merchandise planning. That becomes a toe hit for the large retailers, where basically they were looking at local assortment detailing. And then we also provided an event planning engine, which basically if you look at back to school, or if you look at your holiday season, how that the demand is basically impacting, and the events are automatically interfacing within that growth of demand. So you can look at it increase and decrease in this demand. So this is what basically we looked at it from the top-down point of view. And then we had few assortment planning requirement which Sahir has mentioned, that we were talking about attribute-based planning, inventory-based cover margin focus, impact and integrations, promotions. That's what basically the typical challenges which we have seen in terms of plan challenges in the assortment side. And what we have tried to provide there is that we have tried to build basically a very, very detailed assortment planning, which basically permits a user a very strong way of operating in terms of performance indicators, scale builders, multi-filters, which basically facilitate the faster assortment planning system. And there we also have provided an option of attribute-based and parameter-based. So if you are in color size, or if you want to do material-based, or you pack-based, so you can basically skip through and move faster and build up your assortment planning in that basis. So that's what the kind of functionality which we provided. We have provided a few of the forecasting engines for the different categories. So the prediction and demand basically kind of built upon it, and these are the solutions you provided in the assortment side. Then we have also had went ahead and developed size set optimization for the fashion retailers. We have provided a markdowns and promotion alerts aspects, which is important in terms of from the today, if you look at the question which I asked, the 27% is a markdown, which is talking about, and that's what exactly is the most important thing, and that's what we have built upon in this. So based on this, we have provided a very strong quantity and value plan, which goes to store and a scalable assortment planning tool to cater the planning needs in this context. I'll move into this, that what we have done is one of the customers. So what we have implemented as a GR map, which basically I've covered in top-down and bottom planning. I'll take a customer point in case. We had one customer in India, which is like I was talking about, a future group, which is almost having 200 stores today, and they serve 3,500 merchandise categories. And these categories differs in the food, fashion, general merchandise, and home. So if you look at, they have multiple formats where they have one side is lifestyle, other side is a value, which is a discounting, and then there's a home, and then they also have an online media, online bazaar, future bazaar. So they have a multiple retail formats which they operate with 3,500 plus categories, and that's how basically the solution which you have provided in this case, which basically takes care of every category differently in this context. Then we have basically, if you look at the unique business requirement for future group, they were basically having multiple retail formats, but the source and supply side is single, team which is operating. So one team is operating, which has to do multiple pricing, sales, and margins analysis. This is what we need to look at it. Then they have a various, information business rules are different, and complex supply chain integration. So in total, with the size of that, the system is able to take care of various requirements in terms of considering their size, and we could able to provide the solution. This is a multi-year engagement. The work in progress is going on. We already finished a sizable amount of work, but the formats we keep on doing one by one, and that's what basically is going on. Sahir, I'll just not take much time because we are run short of time. So I thought I'll put in the questions here. Joseph, you have any questions from the audience to me to address? I'll be very happy to address that.
Yeah, and Joe, if you want to address the first question to Amitabh, please.
Sure. Thank you both. How is mobility used in this process?
Traditionally, Joseph, if you look at mobility, is a very new thing which has come up, but the amount of data which planners operate, let's say the merchandising planner or a store planner or a allocator, is huge. And that is what we have broken this whole planning and extension in the mobility apps. And we've given, say, if you want to allocate, use the mobile phone on dynamically see it and locate and a request on the mobility phone. And so it goes back to the core ERP engine, core planning engine, and back to ERP engine. We allocate the DC stock and request, okay, your allocation has been taken care of. So that's like kind of one of the example I'm giving you. Same thing, if the planner is looking at his category review, he doesn't need to come to in a meeting. He can see it, what the impact is, the growth, the demand is high and low. He can look at it. So he has on on an iPhone or a smart phone, he can see the graphs and he can see the difference analysis over there. So that's kind of a mobility we have provided within the system, Joe.
Another question, Joe, is around how does merchandising get feedback from their stores? And that's a great question. It's a great question because that's an age-old sort of complexity in retail, whether it's specialty or non-specialty. The fact is that store managers and their employees have tremendous insights on what's selling and what's not selling, as well as the shelf-level response of promotions, dynamic pricing, as well as markdowns. And traditionally, we all know that this feedback loop has been very manual and has been email-based. Another area where I think mobility can make a difference, and so can video intelligence, where you can give specific feedback from your stores as to how to optimize merchandise in the store, and from a space, planogram, and shelf-level standpoint by using video intelligence. So I think it's a combination of mobility, video intelligence, as well as those companies that are providing specific feedback tools to the stores in terms of having an actual module within the merchandising system, whereby the store managers and their employees can not only provide data-based feedback, so the data is already there, you know which inventory is moving and which is not, but I think where they can provide specific feedback to merchandisers and planners on what's really working and what's not working in the stores.
I believe, Sahir, mobility is a very, very evolutionary thing which is happening, and I see with the planning perspective where we are used to have a huge data and we're playing with huge data on one side, mobility is breaking into capsules. And for every capsule, so if you look at a category or shelf as a capsule and you want to operate using mobility, that's that's going to be the key in the market. And that's the way the trend I can see, that wherever we are introducing the mobility, the consumer, the retailers is saying that it's changing the thought process and people are getting more adaptive to the solution. Because it's really to be heavy Excel sheet based or column based planning and analysis, which is what we're breaking into capsules, and that's what geotagging, video interfacing, your mobility is bringing on the table, and the communication is much faster happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last question that we should address, and we should wrap up this webinar. And we will address all questions, by the way, folks. I appreciate so many questions that have actually come in. There's a question around range planning. So in a brief way, Amitabh, if you can take up range planning, and then I also have a perspective.
See, the range planning, Sahir, is primarily from the fashion retailer point of view, where the season cycle is like, typically that autumn, winter is now breaking into every 2 months and 3 months kind of cycle. And that is how basically the new product introduction happens. And that's what the whole life cycle has to be realized into. How do you address 3 weeks or 3 months life cycle of product and ensure the markdown comes into place and get into new product into place. So how the range planning is linking with the local assortment, because the needs and max collections are different for the different retail locations, and that's what the interfaces has been done. So what we have done is that we have built up the local store-based range planning and aggregated to merchandise level range plan, where the retail planner can look at it, what is to be a new fashion product to be introduced and what is not, what is to be discontinued and what is the core, and then they break this whole system and basically look at and integrate with the supply chain system, because this is a pre-allocation concept. So this is like kind of a range plan works with the pre-allocation, that this is what I'm going to deploy in the stores, and then it basically links up with the purchasing system. So range planning is primarily we have addressed, build up a range planning component, integrating with the deployment and pre-allocation engine, and then ultimately look in in-season and assortment side. This is the cycle which we have provided to these retailers, Sahir.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think range planning needs to be looked at from a product classification. So really going down to the planning for different individual SKUs, top sellers, those that you expect will be huge complementary items or add-on sellers. I think there's a specific range plans that can be created for those items, and categories of products that could be used and positioned around the stores and in and around the shelves for a lot of point of purchase buys. Of course, we have significant planning tools for any sort of range planning today, but also to consider three components of range planning. One is the short-term range, long-term range, and more strategic planning. So range planning is involving into these three components of short-term, long-term, and strategic. And what this really talks about is essentially not just the life cycle of the product, and the overall cycle time of being able to sell through the product. But it talks about the ability to strategically classify your overall assortment in those that are short-term items, or those could be new product introductions, long-term planning, which would go into specific SKU, size, color combinations, and then those that would typically classify as your breadwinners, and that would also get into the long-term range. And then comes the strategic category, and the strategic category is where you as a retailer are willing to take a risk and a punt of creating some strategic drivers for your range plan within the overall merchandise plan. What are those strategic SKUs that you believe are going to drive specific consumer behavior and referrals, as well as customer loyalty? So that's my take on it. And Joe, I'll hand it back over to you to wrap it up.
Yes, Sahir, thanks. I think one of the major points which you also mentioned that in your presentations, a CPG and the manufacturer interface. So that's also like vendor interfacing, cataloging is also happening in range plan big time. That's also the traditionally thinking and moving in integration collaboration system is building up.
That's a great point. Yeah. Absolutely.
Thanks, Sahir.
Great. Well, thank you both. And this does bring us to the conclusion of the webinar. I'd like to thank everyone that participated in today's event, our presenters Sahir Anand and Amitabh Nima, and of course our sponsor GroupSoft for making this webinar possible. Yeah. I hope you found our webinar beneficial, and we do wish you the best wherever you may be. You may now disconnect.
Yeah, thanks.